So I think we can start now. And I was wanting to ask Sarojadi whether she would like to also read, but until now she has not been reading. Would you like to read, Sarojadi? I don't know if she is on the line. Okay, she's not answering immediately. So we can, I think, start reading. Who will read?
Good morning, Rangada.
Good morning, Harika. Yeah, so you can read if you want.
Sarojadi has unmuted herself. 1 minute, Rangata. Sarojadi has unmuted herself. Would she like to read? Sarojadi, would you like to read?
There's no. Exactly. Just tell me the page number, please.
Yeah.
You have the SABCL or the new one, CWSA?
Old one only.
Old one. That is 191.
191.
The ethical idealist.
That's
In
right.
para.
Sorry, please somebody carry on today. Tomorrow I'll
Okay.
I have to
Okay.
take a call. Okay.
Sarika, continue.
Harika, go ahead.
Okay. The ethical idealist tries to discover the supreme law in his own moral data, in the inferior powers and factors that belong to the mental and ethical formula. And to sustain and organize them, he selects a fundamental principle of conduct, essentially unsound and constructed by the intellect, utility, hedonism, reason, intuitive conscience, or any other generalized standard. All such efforts are foredoomed to failure. Our inner nature is the progressive expression of the eternal spirit, and too complex a power to be tied down by a single dominant mental or moral principle. Only the supramental consciousness can reveal to its differing and conflicting forces their spiritual truth and harmonize their divergences.
Okay, so he's talking of the ethical man, but the ethical idealist, the one who thinks that this should be the ideal behavior for man. And he is mentioning two, utility and hedonism. There can be so many other standards also. We'll have a look. The ethical idealist, okay, he's not saying the ethical man, he's saying the ethical idealist, the one who thinks that morality is the ideal for humanity. Of course, it is not. Spirituality is much greater than idealism, ethical idealism. But anyway, so the ethical idealist tries to discover this supreme law in his own moral data. That means in his individual capacity, he looks into himself and tries to see what would be the highest and best mode of behavior towards the others in the world. So his own moral data, not coming from outside, but from within his own nature, within his own mind, within his own heart. Okay? In the inferior powers and factors that belong to the mental and ethical formula, the mind is inferior to the spiritual planes of consciousness. That's why Srimad is saying ethics is inferior to the spiritual powers. He's not mentioning spiritual powers, but obviously he means that. The inferior powers and factors that belong to the mental and ethical formula. And to sustain and organize them, he selects a fundamental principle of conduct, essentially unsound. We'll see why it is unsound, and constructed by the intellect. Note the word constructed. It is a construction, and all constructions will suffer also destruction. It's very interesting because nothing lasts forever in the physical world. No? So however much you construct, it is constructed by the intellect, the mind constructs. He has mentioned utility and hedonism. There is a principle that what is good, okay, that was a question that the philosophers faced in Europe. So this Jeremy Bentham, okay, he came across this utilitarianism. That which is useful to man is the good. That which is useless to man is not good. Okay? So there is a utilitarian philosophy. I won't go into details, but utilitarianism lasted for a certain amount of time. Yes, that which is useful to you is good. Good in a very relative sense, not in a moral sense, but in a practical sense. Anyway, utilitarianism is a genuine method. Then the other one is hedonism. Somebody else, Epicurus. Then also there is another man called Michael Onfray, etc. So he, according to him, that which gives you pleasure is good. That which gives you pain is bad. Trying to find out what is good and bad. So hedonism, Epicureanism, this is the philosophy also. But we know very well that that which gives you pleasure can also very well give you pain. So that also theory is not going to last too long, obviously. In fact, we know that that which gives you pain in the beginning will give you absolute bliss in the end. Tarika will remember in the Gita, that which is very pleasant in the beginning ends in sorrow. And that which is very painful in the beginning, yoga, will give you eternal happiness. It is there in the Gita. So this is Gita is absolutely contrary to the theory of hedonism. Okay, so that's what Sembli is saying. That's why they are very limited and unsound. They are not sound formulas. Pleasure is not the, but there is another aspect of hedonism, that is the subtler enjoyment. Okay, that is slightly better because subtler enjoyment, say enjoyment of music, okay, enjoyment of a refined taste, enjoyment of beauty with it, not with attachment and desire. So there is a higher hedonism, but that also is only one aspect of the divine. Okay? There is also the aspect of power. There is also the aspect of knowledge. It's not only Ananda. So that also is only partially true. Even if you take hedonism in the positive sense. But hedonism, as it was formulated in Europe, was the pleasure, not Ananda. Okay, so I'm just saying all these are very, very, and also he said reason. Reason is not announced by any one particular person, but all materialist things that there should be, everything should be based on reason and not faith. In Tamil Nadu, we have a E.V.R. Periyar, who revolted against the domination of the Brahmins, and that is why the DMK, the Dravidian movement started. Because of course, it happened all over India. The Brahmins were putting down the other castes. They thought themselves to be superior. So this is the backlash. So in Tamil Nadu, okay, particularly in Tamil Nadu, not anywhere else, E.V.R. Periyar, he was supposed to be a philosopher. He said that we reject Brahminism and because all sorts of superstitions are there in the shallow concepts of the Hinduism. So he rejected that, the caste system. And he said we will base ourselves on reason. Okay? So that is in Europe, everybody says we must base ourselves on reason and not on faith and religion. So that was not any one particular person. But all these will fail. Yes,
these theories helped at that time of history, no? Helped mankind in that time of history, right?
There is an element of truth in it, of course. That's right. In Life Divine, he does say that materialism has done a lot of good because all fuzzy, hazy thinking is eliminated. Even spirituality is not asking you to be unclear in your mind, rather than the opposite. Base yourself absolutely on solid reason. Okay, but faith also is there, and that also is there. So there is an element of truth, but if it is exaggerated, it ends up in what is happening in Tamil Nadu. Denial of temple, denial of Sanatana Dharma, denial of everything, God. So this goes to the other extreme. So intuitive conscience or any other generalized standing, all these will fail because they are limited. all such efforts are foredoomed to failure, all based on ethics. Okay? Our inner nature is a progressive expression of the eternal spirit and too complex a power to be tied down by any single dominant mental or moral principles. So moral principle is mentally constructed, but it need not be only mind. As I said, using the word or moral principle. He is saying dominant mental, single dominant mental or moral principle. Morality can spring also from your feelings, from your heart also, from the higher vital. So this is what he is saying. Only the supramental consciousness can reveal to its differing and conflicting forces their spiritual truth and harmonize their divergences. Because in morality, you have divergences. If you remember, we have discussed this. When you say that when you go by morality and mind constructed rules, you will see that there are very often opposite principles which are both valid. I give you several examples, but the best example is discipline and freedom. Okay? Both are necessary. Freedom is very necessary. Certainly, freedom is better than slavery. No, there's no doubt about it. And domination by others, you should be free. But at the same time, discipline also is necessary. But they are contradictory. If there are discipline and rules are there, then my freedom is truncated. It is limited. So therefore, they are opposites. So that's why moral ideals will not ever last forever. So you have to go to this supramental consciousness where all these opposites are completely harmonized. So we can't understand that at a mental level. But if you go there, you will see that there are two aspects of the same thing. The other thing which is often also used is the love and justice. Okay? Compassion and justice also are two opposite principles. Justice has a point. If someone does something bad, it is just that he should be punished or pulled up at least. And if there is something which is being done good, normally in the physical world, you are rewarded. So, but if you do something bad, you are punished. But should you punish or should you try to reform with compassion? So these are the opposites. Sri Aurobindo gives the best opposite of all in the record of yoga. He says you must be a slave to God and you must also be a master of yourself. So mastery and slave, okay, they are also opposites. So you have to combine all the opposites in yourself, and at the supramental level, these problems disappear. They become only complementary aspects of the one thing. That's what he's saying. Very small para. So now we can read the next para. The later religions endeavor to fix the tide. So, Archana
Would
ji,
you like me to read?
yes, okay, read. They're all small paras. You can go ahead.
The later religions endeavor to fix the type of a supreme truth of conduct, erect a system and declare God's law through the mouth of avatar or prophet. These systems, more powerful and dynamic than the dry ethical idea, are yet for the most part no more than idealistic glorifications of the moral principle sanctified by religious emotion and the label of a superhuman origin. Some, like the extreme Christian ethics, are rejected by nature because they insist unworkably on an impracticable absolute rule. Others prove in the end to be evolutionary compromises and become obsolete in the march of time. The true divine law, unlike these mental counterfeits, cannot be a system of rigid ethical determinations that press into their cast iron molds all our life movements. the law divine, is truth of life and truth of the spirit, and must take up with a free living plasticity and inspire with the direct touch of its eternal light each step of our action and all the complexity of our life issues. It must not act as a rule and formula, but as an enveloping and penetrating consciousness, conscious presence that determines all our thoughts, activities, feelings, impulsions of will by its infallible power and knowledge.
Yeah. So, as I said, not a very big para. So, he's talking about the later religions. And next para, he will talk of the ancient religions or the earlier religions. The later religions obviously are Christianity, Islam, then we have also the Zoroastrianism. They are all later religions, not in the earliest, 5,000 years earlier, they were not. I don't know about Zoroastrianism, when it started, but certainly the Abrahamic religions, what we call the Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam, are recent, relatively recent. Okay? So they endeavor to fix the type of a supreme truth of conduct, absolutely the highest, that's what we think. Erect a system and declare God's law through the mouth of avatar or prophet. So both they do that. Okay? God's law, declare God's law with the 10 commandments of Moses. Okay? So that also is there. It's a law. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And also the prophet is the Muhammad. Okay? So he's telling you this. By the way, Christianity didn't start immediately after Christ. No, you know that. Christianity started 400 years after Christ's birth. Okay, so that was it was created by others. These systems, particularly these two, okay, the Hindu system is not a religion, number one. Okay, it's a way of life, number one. Because under Hinduism, there is no such thing as a Hindu religion. They are under the title of Hinduism. You have so many. You have Jains, you have Shaivism, you have Vaishnavism, you have Sikhism. They are also part of the Indian system of religions. Okay, so many of them. So, these systems, more powerful and dynamic than the dry ethical idea, are yet for the most part no more than idealistic glorifications of the moral principle sanctified, made holy, sanctified, okay, by religious emotion and the label of a superhuman origin. It is coming from God. God, 10 commandments are coming from God, we think. Okay. And also, even today I was watching a video where a Muslim is saying that our religion forbids us to go to any other religion. Okay? Absolutely narrow. You have to remain fixed in Islam. You can't go to any other. Only what Allah says is allowed. Nobody else. So that's what he's saying. He's saying most part more than idealistic glorifications of the moral principle sanctified by religious emotion and the label of a superhuman origin. It's coming from God. So it is obviously it is true. But how do you know it's coming from God? We don't know. But anyway, that's what you think. You believe that. Some, like the extreme Christian ethic, are rejected by nature because they insist unworkably on an impracticable absolute rule. So who is rejecting? Nature is rejecting. In other words, what does it mean? That nobody is going to follow these laws. You say don't tell lies, almost everybody tells lies. When you say I only tell the truth, that's the biggest lie. So are rejected by nature. And when you say that you should not kill anybody else or hurt anybody else, again nature rejects it. This is going on all the time. Murder is more common than anything else. Okay, it is very, very common. If you open the newspaper one day, you will see all reports of who murdered whom. Ah. Because they insist unworkably on an impractical absolute rule. Why? Because human beings are imperfect. Nobody is perfect. And absolute rules can be followed only by the perfect. But the perfect realize that absolute rules are not the right thing. They have to be very, very flexible. Okay, it becomes opposite. Others prove in the end to be evolutionary compromises. Okay, so this is there. Also, we can explain in so many other ways. Okay, we know that, for instance, in Islam, if you are a thief, your hand is cut off. Okay? Now, with evolution and understanding of things, I don't know if in some places they still practice that. Okay, it's unbelievable, but they practice that. Or if you are caught having a relationship outside the matrimony, okay, then you are you have committed a sin and you have to be stoned to death. So these are the rules. These are absolutely, but then slowly they change these things. Okay. There's another thing also which I can mention: evolutionary compromise, and they prove in the end to be evolutionary compromises and disappear and become obsolete. They don't become anymore. But one thing comes to my mind: until now, everybody thought that homosexuality was something very, very unnatural and very bad, and it should be punished. Okay, famous cases: Oscar Wilde. Okay, poor Oscar Wilde. He was so sensitive and so wonderful a man, but he was put into prison because of this. Today, it has changed altogether. The idea has changed. So this is what Swami is saying. Evolutionary ideals realize that some of these rules made by religions and morality are not valid anymore. Okay, that's what he's saying. Evolutionary compromise become obsolete with the march of time. The true divine law, unlike these mental counterfeits, they're counterfeits, they're not real things. Okay? They pretend to be absolute, but the very fact that they think themselves to be absolute shows that they are not at all the divine law. They cannot be, because the divine is not, he is flexible, he is inclusive, he is not exclusive. Cannot be a system of rigid ethical determinations that press into their cast iron molds all our life movements. Very interesting image that they are using. When you pour iron ore into a cast iron mold, it gives you only one fixed type of form. Okay? So that's the image he used. So you must not tell lies. Okay? You must not kill anybody. They are very good, but they are not absolute at all. Because sometimes it will be necessary to kill, and it may sometimes the half-lie also is allowed if the attitude is good. The famous case of Yudhishthira telling a half-lie about Ashwatthama. But a lie is a lie, so there are implications. But it can be used for a purpose which will lead good, rather. Okay, so there are many examples one can give to answer. So and this question was asked to Sri Lanka once. Okay? There was Rajangam used to do the marketing for the ashrams, food items and other items also. He used to buy. So he asked once to Sri Lanka whether he can use a small, not absolutely a lie, but something half-truth, whether he can use to reduce the prices. So Sri Lanka said, no, that should not be done. But there's also another thing. If you are faced with a situation where you have to, the choice is only between a lie and a truth, and the truth will end in very bad, in a very bad way, then you have the option of silence. You don't need to speak. I give you a very interesting, very small example which we have discussed many times. If someone is running into a room and is saying, there's a murderer who is chasing me, please hide me somewhere. So he hides himself somewhere, and when the murderer comes into the room, are you going to tell him the truth? Where is this fellow hiding? Are you going to tell him the truth? It's going to end badly. So if you tell a lie, but with a good intention, it is justifiable to a certain extent. But Sri Aurobindo says you have the option of silence also. And you can also gesture. I don't know what's happening. Okay, you can say that. So it's a very complex question. But at this level, absolute rules, the point is, absolute rules are not always the right thing. That's what Sri Aurobindo pointed out. Okay. Some can change with evolutionary compromises and they'll be rejected ultimately in the march of time. The true divine law, unlike these mental counterfeit, not the right thing. Now, the word counterfeit is very interesting. The difference between a 5 rupee note which is genuine and a 5 rupee note which is not genuine, manufactured privately by somebody, is a counterfeit. Apparently, they look the same, but it's a counterfeit. So, exactly in the same way, there is an element of truth in these Christian morals. There is an element of truth, but they are counterfeits. So, they're using the word counterfeit in a very interesting way. Okay? Half-truths cannot be a system of rigid ethical determinations that press into their cast iron molds all our life movements. The law divine is truth of life and truth of spirit and must take up with a free living plasticity, not the word plasticity, opposed to the absolute rules of morality. Free living plasticity. This is the opposite of morality. And inspired with the direct touch of its eternal life, each step of our action and all the complexity of our life issues. Life is too complex. Life can never be. It is infinite and it expresses itself in 100,000 ways. You can't straitjacket life and say, only this is true and only that, and you should not do anything else. Not true at all. Okay? It must act not as a rule and formula, but as an enveloping and penetrating conscious presence that determines all our thoughts, activities, feelings, impulsions of will by its infallible power and knowledge. One interesting example also just now flashed in my mind about sabari. Okay? You're not supposed to give anything jhuta, okay, half-eaten, which is to those who are your superiors or those who are, you worship them. But sabari does exactly that only. She tastes each berry to see whether it is sweet and then she offers it to the Lord. So here is an example of breaking the social law. Okay, so, because the attitude inside is absolutely pure and perfect. So, this is what they're saying in the Bible. Okay, all moral laws don't hold good. Now we go to the next para, the older religions, and so we will tell you what the older religions are. Manusmriti.
Can I
Yes.
can I say something about Christianity?
Go ahead.
I had been to Bethlehem in Israel.
Okay.
And there is supposed to be the cave of nativity where Christ was born.
That's right.
Exactly above that, it was the Queen of Syria who built the first church. And then next to that is the Greek Orthodox Church, which came second. And third was the Roman Catholic Church. And this pattern follows all through in Jerusalem and Bethlehem. You have the Syrian, the Greek Orthodox, and the Roman Catholic. You know, so it was the Queen of Syria who built the first church. It wasn't Christ who made the church.
That's right. That's right. And Syria was a Christian country at one time, you know, and now it has become a Muslim country. This is what all the Muslims do everywhere. Okay? They go into a country and slowly they increase their population. This is their technique. And now Europe is very well aware of that, and they are trying to curtail that. Okay? Europe has become very, very aware of this fact. The Muslims are going all over into Europe, everywhere. And then first they ask for refuge, and then they ask for Shariat law to themselves. And in the generosity of your heart, you allow them that. And slowly, slowly, it gets worse and worse, and they start controlling. And this is the way they do. So Syria is one perfect example of a Christian country which became today, it's a Muslim country. There was a civil war for a long time, and it became a Muslim country. Anyway, we have 8:32. We have got about 6, 7, 8 minutes. So let's read the next one. The older religions. Okay. Who will read? Archana Di, you have the text and you can read.
No, Rangada, now I can't read. I'm in the dispensary.
Okay, because 8:30, yes. Okay.
Yes.
So then Pallavi, you can read if you have the text.
Yes, Rangada.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Rangada.
Yeah, the older religions.
The older religions erected their rule of the wise, their dicta of Manu or Confucius, a complex shastra in which they attempted to combine the social rule and moral law with the declaration of certain eternal principles of our highest nature in some kind of uniting amalgam. All three were treated on the same ground as equally the expression of everlasting verities, Sanatan Dharma. But two of these elements are evolutionary and valid for a time: mental constructions, human readings of the will of the eternal. The third, attached and subdued to certain social and moral formulas, had to share the fortunes of its forms. Either the Shastra grows obsolete and has to be progressively changed or finally cast away, or else it stands as a rigid barrier to the self-development of the individual and the race. The Shastra erects a collective and external standard. It ignores the inner nature of the individual, the indeterminable elements of a secret spiritual force within him. But the nature of the individual will not be ignored. Its demand is inexorable. The unrestrained indulgence of his outer impulses leads to anarchy and dissolution. But the suppression and coercion of his soul's freedom by a fixed and mechanical rule spells stagnation or an inert death. Not this coercion or determination from outside, but the free discovery of his highest spirit and the truth of an eternal movement is the supreme thing that he has to discover.
Again, not a very big para, but very full of so many suggestions. The older religions, and he himself told me what the older religions are. Manusmriti. Okay, it's an interesting it's a relic of the old culture of India, Manusmriti, where there are all rules are laid down. I have not read the Manusmriti, but I would like to do that one day. Okay? I have to get the text and see what he said. Or Confucius. Confucianism also is an old religion in China. A complex Shastra. That complex Shastra also is complex, mind you. Okay, that is in India. Okay? So these three. In also, there is another one which you can also say older religion, Tirukkural. Okay? Tiruvalluvar made in Tamil Nadu. He wrote the Tirukkural. The Tirukkural is also all sorts of rules and regulations are there. I don't know if there is much of spirituality in it, but certainly there are many moral rules that I know. But I don't know whether it is some spiritual principles also are there or not, I don't know. But these are all the Shastras to govern social rule. A complex Shastra, he discusses these three, in which they attempted to combine the social rule and moral law with the declaration of certain eternal principles. That's the whole problem, eternal principles. Because mind constructed things can never be eternal. That's the whole problem. Of our highest nature in some kind of uniting amalgam. Amalgam is a collection, it's a collection of many things. All three, were treated on the same ground as equally the expression of everlasting verities, Sanatana Dharma. But two of these elements are evolutionary and valid for a time, which are the Confucianism and Manusmriti. Manusmriti also. These are, simply saying, are evolutionary and valid for a time. Mental constructions, human readings of the will of the eternal. What you think that God would like you to do, because you have ideas of morality, good and bad, and there is a limited, there is a limitation in those views. But anyway, the third, which is the complex Shastra, okay? The third, attached and subdued to certain social and moral formulas, had to share the fortunes of its forms. So the Sanatana Dharma broke up into so many different types of religions, even in India. Okay? So Shaivism, Vaishnavism, so many other types of things which are, there's many small religions like that which go into different channels because they are not even very well known. But there are any number of things like that. Had to share the fortunes of its forms. And fortunes of its forms, the forms are exactly as I said, Shaivism and Vaishnavism are forms of the Sanatana Dharma. So they also will lose their rigidities, okay, will share the fortunes of its forms. Either the Shastra grows obsolete and has to be progressively changed or finally cast away, or else it stands as a rigid barrier to self-development of the individual and the race. So not only individual but also the race. When you make rigid barriers, as I said, you have to do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. They are very clear and very clearly visible in Christianity and Islam particularly. The Shastra erects a collective and external standard. That's the whole point. Internals, there are no standards. Sarva dharman parityajya. You have to give up all. Internally, there are no. But externally, you have to tell people how to behave and how not to behave. It ignores the inner nature of the individual, the indeterminable elements of a secret spiritual force within him. But the nature of the individual will not be ignored. Its demanding inexorable. He will break away from the rules and regulations of morality. The unrestrained indulgence of his outer impulses leads to anarchy and dissolution. So, anarchy, because if you say to somebody that you have to don't drink, then and smoke, then they will come to unrestrained intelligence of the outer impulses will lead to anarchy and dissolution. But the suppression and coercion of his soul's freedom by a fixed and mechanical rule spells stagnation or an inner death. This is very interesting what Swami is saying. I'll give you just one example of the of drink. Everybody knows that alcoholism is something very damaging in society. You make a huge amount of damage to your family and even in society. Okay, it's a well-known thing. But when you try to introduce prohibition, what does it do? Does it solve the problem? No, it doesn't. People start making liquor illicitly and selling, and sometimes it is done for shortcuts and it becomes poisonous. And so many cases are there in India. One day, suddenly in Bangalore, 100 people died because they consumed illicit liquor. Because it's been done in a short way, and that's what happens. So you can't solve the problem that way. You know what Srivda said about drink, whether prohibition is right or wrong. Prohibition by itself, you can't control things like that. But you can, by teaching young people that the ills of alcoholism, you can to a certain extent control it, but you can't control fully anything at level 1. You can't control a human being unless he himself realizes the dangers of what he is doing. So, what Srivda advocated is, give, but you have to give pure stuff. The rest is another problem altogether. But you can't solve the problem by saying, don't do it and don't do this. You can't solve the problem by passing laws. Okay? They say, you can't control humanity by passing laws in parliament. You can't do that. It doesn't work. But suppression and coercion of the soul's freedom by fixed and mechanical rule spells stagnation or an inner death. When you stifle somebody with rules, his freedom is affected very badly, and then he can't progress. Because progress comes only when there is freedom to do in this way and that way. Okay? Not this coercion or determination from outside, but the free discovery of his highest spirit and the truth of an eternal movement is the supreme thing that he has to discover. All the rules laid from outside on somebody will not work. Not only will not work, but also will be harmful. So what is the solution? Each individual has to find out for himself what is the right way of doing things. That's what St. Louis said. He has to discover it from within. So, the end today, as usual, I have gone 3 minutes beyond the time. The higher ethical law. So, okay, page 204, higher ethical law has to be noted down.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll make a note.
Thank you, Rangata.
Very much.
Merci Rangata. On जुड़ने.
Merci,
Rangata. Thank you, Rangata.
Thank you, Rangata.
Very much. Have a nice day.